There's a reason your heart is still beating. There's a reason you woke up this morning, opened your eyes, and took another breath. And that reason is not random, accidental, or meaningless. God Himself has carried you through decades of joy and pain, victories and losses, laughter and tears. And here you are, over 60 years of life, and still standing still, breathing, still part of His story.
1. God's plan for you remains unfinished. Your continued breath is heaven's resounding, unmistakable, and utterly sovereign declaration. The divine blueprint for your life is still being unfolded, layer upon layer, chapter upon chapter, with the precision of an eternal architect who never misplaces a single detail. Job chapter 14 verse 5 states that the days of our lives are determined by God. No one can shorten them without His permission. This is not a fragile thread held together by the thin strands of human luck, fleeting medical advances, or the whimsical roll of cosmic dice. It is the unbreakable, unshakable, and utterly reliable will of the Almighty Himself that sustains every beat of your heart, every rise and fall of your chest, every moment you remain on this side of eternity.
Every sunrise you have greeted beyond the milestone of 60 is not merely another rotation of the earth. It is a fresh, personal signature from the author of life, a living postscript that declares in no uncertain terms, your story has not reached its final sentence, its climactic revelation, or its ultimate purpose. Step back for a moment and survey the landscape of your journey. There were seasons when illness struck with such ferocity that medical charts read like death sentences, yet you walked out of hospital rooms when others did not. There were nights when grief descended like a suffocating fog, pressing so heavily upon your spirit that you wondered if your lungs would ever draw air again without the weight of sorrow. There were financial collapses that stripped away security, relational betrayals that shattered trust into 1,000 irreparable pieces, spiritual droughts that left your soul parched and questioning every promise you once clung to. Others walked paths that mirrored yours, same diagnosis, same heartbreak, same betrayal, same desert, and they did not emerge on the other side. Cemeteries are filled with stories that ended prematurely, dreams that were buried before fruition, voices that were silenced before their song was fully sung. Yet here you stand, scarred, yes, weary perhaps, but undeniably, miraculously, sovereignly standing. This is not because you possess some rare genetic fortitude, some indomitable human spirit that outshines the rest. No, your preservation is not about superior strength, superior strategy, or superior anything. It is about a specific, unrepeatable, and divinely ordained purpose that still clings to your name like a holy seal, a purpose that heaven refuses to release until every last thread has been woven into the tapestry of God's redemptive story. Let the biblical precedent of Moses serve as your mirror and your mandate. At 40 years old, Moses was absolutely certain he understood his destiny. He had been raised in Pharaoh's palace, educated in the wisdom of Egypt, and burning with zeal for the deliverance of his oppressed people. He saw the suffering. Hebrew, he felt the righteous anger rise. He struck the Egyptian taskmaster, and in that single impulsive moment, everything unraveled. One act of misplaced justice sent him fleeing into the wilderness, where he spent the next 40 years tending sheep, nursing regret, and watching his grand vision of liberation fade into the dust of Midian. By the time he reached 80, Moses had likely buried every lingering ember of ambition. He had settled into the quiet anonymity of a shepherd's life, assuming his most productive years were irretrievable, his calling irrevocably forfeited. Then, on an ordinary day in an ordinary desert, God ignited a bush that burned but was not consumed and spoke words that rewrote not only Moses' story, but the entire trajectory of human history. I am sending you. The man who once fled Egypt in fear and shame returned as the instrument of its divine judgment and Israel's divine deliverance. The leader who thought his prime was past became the greatest lawgiver, liberator, and intercessor the world had ever known. If God could launch the most monumental mission of Moses' life, at an age when most would have retired to reminisce about the good old days, then what unimaginable assignments might he still be holding in reserve for you? There are prayers that only your voice, shaped by decades of watching God move in ways no one else has witnessed, seasoned by tears that watered the soil of intercession and tempered by answers that arrived when all hope seemed lost, can carry into the throne room with the weight and authority heaven recognizes. There are conversations waiting to unfold in hospital corridors, over kitchen tables, in parking lots after church, where only your words forged in the crucible of personal loss, proven in the laboratory of answered prayer, and delivered with the quiet confidence of one who has seen God come through again and again, will land with the precision needed to shift an entire life trajectory. There are acts of kindness only your hands that have held newborns, and coffins, signed divorce papers and wedding certificates, wiped tears and raised them in worship, can extend with the authenticity that opens the most armored hearts.
The reservoir of wisdom you carry is not a nostalgic keepsake to be dusted off for family gatherings. It is a living, flowing well from which a parched, confused, and desperately thirsty generation needs to drink deeply and repeatedly.
Do not make the tragic mistake of equating a slower physical gait, a quieter social calendar, or a smaller circle of influence with a diminished calling from God. The world may measure productivity in speed, volume, and visibility, but heaven measures it in depth, eternity, and faithfulness. Psalm chapter 92, verse 14 confirms, "They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green." Even if arthritis has stiffened your fingers, your intercession can still topple demonic strongholds that have held families captive for generations. Even if your voice now trembles with age, it can still declare truth that silences the lies of the enemy and sets captives free. Even if your immediate circle has shrunk to a handful of faithful friends, your presence can still reflect the character of Jesus in a way that draws wanderers home from the far country. The limitations of the aging body do not constrain the boundless reach of a spirit that remains aligned with the purposes of God. Every morning you awaken is not just another day to endure, it is God leaning close, placing his hand upon your shoulder and whispering with tender urgency, "I still have kingdom work for you that no one else on earth can replace." The prayers only you can pray, the lives only you can touch, the glory only you can reflect. Rise, beloved, and step boldly into the assignment I have preserved you to fulfill. 2. You are a living testimony of God's faithfulness. Your life is not merely a private pilgrimage, it is a public proclamation, a walking, breathing, undeniable sermon that preaches without the need for a pulpit, a microphone, or a platform. Every line etched into the landscape of your face, every tremor that now accompanies your once steady hands, every silver strand that catches the light like threads of divine embroidery, each is a stanza in an epic poem of endurance, a poem written not in ink but in the indelible script of grace. Psalm chapter 71 verse 18 mentions, "Even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come." You are not waiting for an invitation to speak. Your very survival is the opening sentence of a message the world desperately needs to hear. Pause and revisit the gallery of divine interventions that line the walls of your memory. Recall the prayers you whispered in sterile hospital rooms, prayers offered with trembling lips and fading hope, certain that no answer would come. Yet healing arrived against every prognosis, every statistic, every grim-faced doctor's prognosis. Remember the doors you pounded on in desperation. Doors of opportunity, doors of provision, doors of reconciliation, only to watch God swing open pathways. No human hand could touch pathways that led you out of dead ends into wide places of blessing. Think of the nights you collapsed under the crushing weight of betrayal, convinced that the story was over, that the final chapter had been written in irreparable loss, only to feel the gentle lift of mercy at dawn, the quiet whisper of a God who refuses to abandon his own. These are not isolated incidents, random coincidences, or fortunate breaks.
They are brushstrokes in a masterpiece titled God Keeps His Word, a masterpiece that has been unfolding across 6 decades and is still far from complete.
People watch you, some with open admiration, many in secret observation, all learning what steadfast faith looks like when it is lived out in real time. The young mother, sitting in the pew behind you, notices how you still lift your hands in worship, though pain shoots through your shoulders like lightning. The teenager scrolling past your social media feed sees the way you speak life into others while carrying your own unseen burdens with quiet dignity. The neighbor who borrowed your lawnmower last summer still remembers the quiet encouragement you offered when his marriage was crumbling and his world was unraveling at the seams. The cashier at the grocery store who has served you for years has watched you respond to long lines and rude customers with a grace that defies explanation. Your consistency in showing up to church when getting out of bed is a battle your choice to praise through pain that would silence others. Your refusal to let bitterness take root when forgiveness would have been easier. All of it preaches a gospel that no argument can refute, no skeptic can dismiss, no darkness can extinguish. The enemy has launched repeated relentless campaigns to silence your testimony. He has whispered lies into your ear in the dead of night. Your mistakes disqualify you. Your energy is spent. Your voice no longer matters. Your best days are behind you. He has tried to bury you under regret, to drown you in despair, to convince you that your chapter is closed and your influence expired. Yet every heartbeat is heaven's resounding rebuttal. Every sunrise you witness is a divine declaration that the God who preserved Noah through the flood, who sustained Joseph through the pit and the prison, who kept Daniel in the lion's den and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, is the same God who has kept you. Your continued existence is not a fluke. It is proof that God is not finished displaying his power through fragile, flawed, but faithful vessels. So keep telling the stories over coffee with a skeptical friend who needs to hear that God still answers prayer in a handwritten note to a struggling grandchild who needs to know that failure is not final in the quiet testimony meeting, where one sentence from your lips becomes the turning point for a soul teetering on the edge of surrender. Recount the miracles with the vivid detail of one who was there when the impossible became reality. Point to the scars that became doorways for grace, the wounds that became wells of compassion, the ashes that became beauty. Remind the world, and remind yourself every single day, that the same God who has carried you across 6 decades of wilderness and wonder, through valleys of shadow and mountains of victory, will carry you across the final threshold into glory with the same faithfulness that has marked every step of your journey.
3. You hold wisdom the next generation craves. The digital age drowns in an ocean of information, yet starves in a desert of wisdom. Facts flood screens at the speed of light, opinions multiply like viruses, and trends shift before they can even be named. But understanding, the kind that steadies the soul and guides the steps, is forged in the slow, searing furnace of lived experience. It is distilled through decades of waiting, on promises that seemed impossible, mourning losses that threatened to unravel faith, celebrating victories that arrived only after the night seemed endless, and learning to trust when every circumstance screamed the opposite. You, beloved, carry this rare and precious treasure. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 31. A firm's gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness.
Your crown is not merely ornamental, a sentimental badge of survival. It is functional, regal, and designed to be passed down to a generation that desperately needs its weight and authority. Today's rising generation navigates pressures you never encountered at their age. Social media comparison that erodes identity by the hour. Identity confusion amplified by cultural chaos. Economic instability that makes planning for tomorrow feel like fantasy. Spiritual disorientation that leaves them grasping for truth in a world of shifting shadows. Yet the timeless, unchanging principles of God's Word remain the same yesterday, today, and forever, and your voice is uniquely qualified to apply them with the clarity and compassion that only experience can provide. When you speak of patience, it is not a platitude pulled from a motivational poster. It is the hard-won fruit of years spent watching God fulfill promises in His timing. not yours promises that arrived when you had all but given up.
When you counsel forgiveness, it carries the authority of someone who has released bitterness that once threatened to poison your soul, who has chosen to bless when cursing would have been justified, who has seen reconciliation bloom in soil that once seemed barren. When you warn against the seductive allure of shortcuts, you speak from the scars of paths you wish you had avoided, paths that promised quick success but delivered long regret.
Picture the Apostle Paul mentoring Timothy across the generations. The aging prisoner did not merely issue commands from a prison cell. He poured out hard-earned insight truths tested on the battlefield of faith, forged in the fires of persecution, and proven in the crucible of suffering. He wrote not as a theorist, but as a veteran, not as a spectator, but as a survivor. You stand in that same apostolic succession, a living link in the chain of faith that stretches from Pentecost to the present. A single conversation over tea with a young believer wrestling with doubt can reroute an entire life. A timely prayer whispered in a hospital corridor for a frightened parent can anchor a wavering soul in the storm. A testimony shared in a small group, delivered with the quiet confidence of one who has seen God move mountains, can become the spark that ignites revival in a hardened heart. Do not underestimate the exponential ripple effect of small, faithful acts. The enemy dreads seasoned voices because they expose his deceptions with calm, unshakable authority. He prefers noise, novelty, and spectacle. God prefers depth, durability, and quiet faithfulness. Every time you open your mouth to speak life into a dying dream, you dismantle lies that have held captives for years. Every time you model humility and correction, you teach a generation how to receive truth without defensiveness or pride. Every time you choose joy amid physical limitation, you demonstrate that happiness is not tethered to circumstance, but rooted in the unchanging character of Christ. Every time you refuse to let age silence your worship, you show a watching world that God is worthy of praise in every season. Your wisdom is not a private possession to be hoarded like a relic. It is a public trust, a sacred stewardship, a divine deposit that God has entrusted to you so you can become a living library for the confused, a compass for the lost, a lighthouse for the storm-tossed, a mentor for the mentorless. The world needs your voice now more than ever, steady seasoned, saturated with scripture and softened by suffering. Speak it in the grocery store, write it in letters, live it in your neighborhood. The next generation is not looking for perfection. They are looking for proof that faith endures, that God is real, and that a life surrendered to Him is worth every cost. 4. You embody God's mercy and restoring grace. Honest reflection on the rearview mirror of your life reveals chapters you would erase if you could. Words spoken in anger that still echo in the ears of those you love. Choices made in pride that cost dearly in ways money cannot measure. Seasons lived in rebellion that left wreckage in their wake. Wreckage of relationships, of reputation, of self-respect. There are moments you replay in the quiet of night, wishing for a divine delete button. Wishing you could unsay, undo, unlive. Yet you awaken each morning not in the condemnation you deserve, but in the continuation you could never earn, loved with an everlasting love chosen before. The foundation of the world restored by a grace that refuses to let go. This is not because your record is spotless, your motives pure, or your performance flawless. It is because God's mercy is limitless, His compassion inexhaustible, and His faithfulness greater than all your failures combined. Lamentations chapter 3 verses 22 through 23 proclaim, "Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." There were moments when one more mistake should have been the final straw, yet grace intercepted like a divine shield. There were nights when shame convinced you that God had turned away in disgust, that the door to fellowship was forever closed. Yet dawn brought fresh pursuit, a love that would not let you go. There were failures so public, so humiliating that you assumed your usefulness was finished, your testimony tainted beyond repair, yet God repurposed the broken pieces into a mosaic of redemption. A story that now shines brighter because of the cracks. Your scars do not shout disqualification. They whisper healing. They do not proclaim defeat. They declare deliverance. Ephesians chapter 2 verses 4 through 5 reveal, "But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved." When you stand before a struggling soul and admit, "I fell hard. I fell further than you can imagine. But God lifted me, forgave me, restored me," you demolish the lie that his love must be earned by perfect behavior. When you extend kindness to someone entangled in the same sin that once ensnared you, offering not judgment but understanding, not condemnation but compassion, you mirror the mercy you have received in abundance. When you refuse to let past regret silence your present worship, choosing instead to lift hands that once clenched in rebellion, you model freedom for those still chained by yesterday's mistakes. The enemy wants your history to become a prison of shame, a locked cell where you rehearse your failures until they define you. God wants it to become a platform of hope, a stage from which you proclaim that no pit is too deep, no stain too dark, no record too damaged for his redeeming touch. Every time you speak of restoration, you give permission to the broken to believe again. Every time you serve from your wounds, visiting the hospitalized, counseling the addicted, encouraging the divorced, you prove that pain can be transformed into purpose, that ashes can become beauty, that the worst chapters can become the setup for the greatest comeback. Over 60 years of mercy have not left you unscathed, but they have left you unshackled, unashamed, and undeniably marked by a love that will not let go. And that, beloved, is a testimony the world cannot ignore, cannot refute, and cannot resist. 5. You still hold eternal influence over souls.
Eternity pivots on the ordinary, unglamorous, seemingly insignificant moments you still inhabit. Within arm's reach, family gatherings filled with laughter and tension, neighborhood sidewalks where loneliness hides behind curtains, grocery store checkouts where exhaustion masks despair, church pews where prodigals sit in silence, are souls whose forever could be altered because you drew breath today, because you chose to speak, to smile, to serve. Matthew chapter 5 verse 16 commands, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." This directive does not include an expiration date, a retirement clause, or a diminished capacity addendum. It is a lifelong commission that grows more potent with every year you walk with God. A smile offered to the exhausted cashier who has been on her feet for 8 hours may be the first kindness she has received all week, the first reminder that she is seen, valued, and loved by a God who notices sparrows and numbers hairs. A meal delivered to the widow next door, still warm from your oven and accompanied by a handwritten note of scripture, may remind her that she is not forgotten, that the God who fed Elijah by ravens still feeds his own. A text of encouragement sent to a grandchild wrestling with doubt in a college dorm may become the anchor that keeps faith afloat when the storms of philosophy and peer pressure rage. These are not grand gestures by worldly standards. They will never make headlines or trend on social media, but they are seismic in the kingdom, planting seeds with everlasting harvest, shifting trajectories that echo through eternity. Your credibility is unmatched, your authority unparalleled. When you speak of God's faithfulness, listeners do not hear theory recited from a textbook. They hear testimony lived out in blood, sweat, and tears. When you model peace in the midst of pain, joy in the midst of loss, hope in the midst of uncertainty, observers learn that the gospel is not a fragile philosophy, but a resilient reality. The young father watching how you honor your spouse after 50 years of marriage learns covenant. The teenager observing your quiet generosity learns stewardship. The stranger witnessing your refusal to gossip learns integrity. The prodigal watching you welcome the wayward without condemnation learns grace. The enemy insists that your influence peaked decades ago, that your voice is outdated, your methods obsolete, your reach irrelevant. God counters with a thunderous, "No, every heartbeat is a fresh opportunity to plant seeds that will outlive you by centuries." The final tally of lives touched souls, saved marriages, restored addictions, broken callings awakened will astonish you when the books are opened in heaven.
Keep shining in the small places. Keep speaking truth in love. Keep loving the unlovely. The mission is not complete until God Himself says it is.
6. God invites you into deeper intimacy. Later life often functions as divine decluttering, a holy clearing of the deck that removes distractions and reveals what truly matters. Careers that once demanded dawn to dusk attention, that defined identity and consumed energy, now recede into memory like waves pulling back from the shore. Children who filled homes with noise, chaos, and constant need now build lives of their own, leaving behind echoes of laughter and empty bedrooms. Schedules that once burst at the seams with appointments, obligations, and urgency now hold margins of silence, space, and stillness. What feels like loss is actually liberation, an open door, a wide invitation, a sacred opportunity to know God more deeply, more intimately, more authentically than any previous season allowed. Psalm chapter 73 verse 25 expresses, "Whom have I in heaven but you, and earth has nothing I desire besides you." You have tasted enough of earth to know its flavors fade. Ambition has revealed its emptiness. Applause has proven fleeting. Accumulation has shown itself to be a burden rather than a blessing. Now His presence becomes the feast your soul hungers for, the water your spirit thirsts for, the home your heart longs for. Prayer evolves from hurried lists recited out of duty to lingering communion savored out of delight. Worship shifts from performance designed to impress others to surrender designed to encounter the other. Scripture reading moves from a checkbox on a spiritual to-do list to a love letter from the beloved that you cannot put down. David's heart cry in Psalm chapter 27 verse 4. "One thing I ask from the Lord, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life," finds fulfillment not in a future heaven, but in the sacred, now in the quiet of early mornings, in the hush of hospital rooms, in the stillness of a soul finally at rest in God. This season is no waiting room, no purgatory of irrelevance. It is a bridal chamber where the beloved draws his bride closer. Whispering secrets the young cannot yet hear, revealing depths the busy cannot yet fathom. God speaks clearest when competing voices fade. He refines motives in the quiet, purifies affections in the solitude, and aligns desires with His own in the stillness. The world may slow your body with age, but heaven accelerates your spirit toward union, toward oneness, toward the fullness of joy that is found only in His presence. 7. You are being readied for your eternal home. Every day past 60 serves a dual glorious purpose. Kingdom advancement on earth and soul preparation for eternity. This life is not the final act. It is the dress rehearsal, the preview, the warm-up for the main event. Heaven is the premiere, the unveiling, the grand celebration, and the curtain rises sooner than you think. John chapter 14 verses 2 through 3 promises, "My Father's house has many rooms. I am going there to prepare a place for you. I will come back and take you to be with me." Trials have refined you like gold in fire, burning away impurities and revealing the image of Christ. Tears have softened your heart, making it tender for joys unimaginable on this side of eternity. Losses have loosened your grip on the temporary positions people, and tightened it on the eternal faith, hope, love. Paul reminds us in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 17, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." That glory is no longer a distant hope. It is a nearing reality, a home being prepared, a welcome being arranged. God is applying final brushstrokes, deepening faith through uncertainty, purifying motives through limitation, aligning affection through loss, so that when you step across the threshold, you are fully at home, fully known, fully His. These closing chapters are not decline, they are ascent, coronation, culmination. Release what rusts, cling to what endures, and live in daily anticipation of the moment you hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Your eternal home is not a generic mansion. It is a custom-crafted dwelling where every room reflects a facet of your journey with Him. Every window opens to a view of His glory. Every echo resounds with the song of the redeemed.
You are here for a holy reason.
You have outlasted tempests that should have sunk you, grief that should have silenced you, battles that should have buried you. Divine purpose still courses through your veins like lifeblood pulsing with the rhythm of eternity. You are not an afterthought, a relic, or a footnote. You are strategically positioned, divinely preserved, and wholly commissioned to complete every assignment heaven has queued for this precise moment in history. Your story is mid-sentence, mid-miracle, mid-mission. People still need the love only you can give, the prayers. Only you can pray the truths, only. You can speak with the weight of a lifetime behind them. The kingdom awaits the unique deposit of glory only your life can release. 60 is not the epilogue. It is the overture to your most resonant movement, the crescendo of a symphony decades in the making. Faith burns brighter words, land heavier legacy echoes longer.
Rise each morning with the awareness that the God of every yesterday walks beside you today. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Moses and Miriam, the God of Peter and Paul, the God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Live boldly in the light of eternity. Love generously in the shadow of the cross. Look expectantly toward the horizon where earth meets heaven. Soon, perhaps sooner than you imagine, you will cross into the home He has been preparing since before you drew your first breath. And all of heaven will rise to celebrate a race run with endurance, a faith kept to the end, a life that finished strong, a servant who heard and heeded the whisper, "I'm not done with you yet."